Korahor, I was lost and alone. Like Korahor, cast far from home. Like Korahor, they stole my voice. Like Korahor, left without a choice. But unlike Korahor, I can speak again. Unlike Korahor, I have a friend. In my darkest hour, my hope was renewed. Because unlike Korahor, I had you. Like Korahor, no guardian angels flew. Like Korahor, shamed by those I never knew. At no God's command, my own footprints remain in this sand. But unlike Korahor, I can speak again. Unlike Korahor, I have a friend. In my darkest hour, my hope was renewed. Because unlike Korahor, I had you. Like Korahor, you helped me to see. Like Korahor, you lit the path for me. Because of you, I'm not without a home. Because of you, I'll never walk alone.
Good morning, congregation. My dear fellowship, I have a great sermon prepared for you today. I've worked very hard on. Everybody hear me okay out there in the chat? Good morning. Welcome to church. I'm going to start sermonizing right away because we have a lot to get through. And today is going to be a pretty big deal. Because we're going to make some people aware. And the wicked are going to take the truth to be hard. This is going to be, good morning, Gene. I'm going to turn off the comments here and start sermonizing. I'm going to ask that people in the chat take care of each other and be, good morning, Blobbert. And I would ask that people I would ask that people protect the Church of Korahor from any accusations. As I told Aaron Ra on his podcast, and he asked me, why don't you make political statements? Why don't you make political endorsements? All the God churches do. And I told him, because if there's anyone who's going to get called out for it, it's going to be the largest, fastest growing, and most successful church for atheists in history. Granted, that's not a crowded room, but but we are going to be that, I feel certain, or we are going to fail. We'll see. But today, I am going to not make any political endorsements, because every church, when they are registered with the IRS, as we are, commits to not make political endorsements, nor to politically organize. This is about history, it's about morality, and it's about the vacuum of moral leadership that we are experiencing in this day and age. And there's a day for us, a time for us to do better. And for somebody to stand up in that void. And that somebody, I have said in my first sermon, Godless sermon, I am willing to be a person, but I need other people. We need people in every corner to be that person. We need people on every corner of the globe to stand up and be counted. Good morning, Bobby. I'm not sure what to call you, Bobicus, except Bobicus. I'm going to close the comments now. Please do not make political comments. It's all right to comment about current events with an attitude of not endorsing or unendorsing. Let's protect each other and protect the church. Let us sermonize. Forgetting is not forgiving. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. In 2016, I already screwed up. It's cool. Now we got it out of the way. In 2016, a survey was conducted that showed that only 32% of high school seniors in America could correctly answer basic questions about the Holocaust. I'm going to say that again. In 2016, that was almost 10 years ago now, believe it or not, there was a survey conducted by the Anti-Defamation League and a Holocaust organization, Holocaust education organization, that showed that 32% of high school seniors could correctly answer just basic questions about the Holocaust. I won't tell you about the statistics in Germany. It's shocking. Martin Niemöller was a decorated German officer during World War I. After the war, he was ordained a Protestant minister and actually supported the Nazi Party. His anti-Semitic sermons celebrated a national revival, restoring German pride and order. Meanwhile, German atheists were already resisting the regime. The largest atheist organization in Germany, with more than 500,000 members, was the German Freethinkers League. In Berlin, they had a building that was called Freethinkers Hall, and from there, their leader, Max Sievers, had already started sending their money and documents abroad, accurately predicting that when the Nazis came to power, they'd come after the atheists first. After Hitler became chancellor, there was a fire at the German parliament building, the Reichstag, in Berlin. A Dutch communist was convicted, but there's long been suspicion that the Nazis set the fire themselves. No one knows. Hitler called the Reichstag fire a sign from God and the most monstrous act of terrorism carried out by Bolshevism in Germany. From that moment on, Hitler was a dictator, and communists and socialists were on notice that the Nazis counted them as enemies. Immediately, the Nazis raided Freethinkers Hall under the justification that Sievers and other atheists were known socialists, which was mainly true. Hitler turned Freethinkers Hall into a center for a new ministry to win back churchgoers in Germany. Max Sievers was arrested and jailed in Berlin. A month later, Sievers was released and he escaped to Belgium, where he gathered up the Freethinkers' resources and began producing anti-fascist propaganda from there. He condemned the alliance between the Nazis and German churches like Niemöller's. But Germany's pastors had problems of their own. The Nazis wanted key church leaders replaced with party members loyal to Hitler. They wanted the implementation of an Aryan clause and changes to Christian doctrine to remove so-called Jewish elements. In response, Niemöller founded the Pastors' Emergency League to resist the Nazis. But it was too late. On July 1st, 1937, Martin Niemöller was arrested for preaching against the state's church policies. He was sentenced to 7 months in prison, but instead, he spent 7 years in concentration camps, including Sachsenhausen and Dachau. In 1939, it was clear that Hitler intended to invade Belgium, and Max Sievers attempted to emigrate to the United States, which was still neutral in the war. But the U.S. deported him back to Belgium. Knowing he was a marked man, Max continued anti-fascist activities from Belgium for the rest of his life. Niemöller attempted to volunteer for the Nazis as a U-boat skipper in September of 1939, but the Nazis wouldn't have it, and he remained in the concentration camp. In 1940, Germany did invade Belgium, and also the Netherlands. Max Sievers and all of his associates went into hiding, and they weren't the only ones. In Amsterdam, Otto Frank, a Jewish publisher, took his wife and 2 daughters into hiding in a secret annex above his old office building. In a broadcast over an illegal shortwave radio, they heard that one of the few acts of defiance that refugees could engage in was to keep a journal, to stand as a witness against the Nazis when the war was finally over. Otto's youngest daughter, Anne, received a diary with a pretty red and white checkered cover. Addressing her diary as Kitty, she documented much more than the oppression of the Nazis, her thoughts, fears, and her secret dream. She wanted to use the diary to practice writing, to become an author. That same diary would be the only book that she would ever write. While the Franks were in hiding with another Jewish family in the Netherlands, the Gestapo found Max Sievers in Belgium on January 17th, 1944. Max Sievers was executed by guillotine in Germany. He had spent his entire life fighting against religious indoctrination, fighting for socialism, and fighting against the Nazis. In August 1944, the Franks' hiding place was raided by the Nazis. They were deported to the famous concentration camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, but the children were separated from their parents and sent to the camp at Bergen-Belsen. On January 6, 1945, Otto's wife, Edith, succumbed to starvation at Auschwitz. 21 days later, the Soviets liberated the camp, and Otto Frank was freed. He returned to Amsterdam and set about trying to find his daughters. That's where he learned that Anne and Margot had died of typhoid at Bergen-Belsen. Anne was just shy of 16 years old. Of the 8 people who he had hidden away for those 2 years, Otto Frank was the only one to survive. But he also received a special treasure. Anne's diary had been found and saved by family friends to honor her memory. Moved by Anne's desire to become an author and a sense of duty to bear witness against the Nazis, he decided to publish the diary, but after a few edits. He removed about 1/3 of the diary, much of it Anne's ranting against her very conservative mother. But one curious omission was Anne's confession about her development. Anne confesses in one entry to a desire that she had to share a kiss with a friend who was a girl, and a proposal that they feel one another's breasts as a proof of their closeness. and compared the naked form of a woman to the beauty of Venus, and confessed that the beauty of women filled her with ecstasy and even brought tears to her eyes. To protect Anne's memory from conservative sensibilities, Otto decided to remove this entry. He published it in 1947. Martin Niemöller survived 7 years in the camps and was liberated by American forces in April 1945. Afterward, he went on a lecture tour to deliver his famous confession. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. In October 1945, Martin Niemöller was part of the Protestant Church Council that drafted the Stuttgart Declaration of Guilt. This declaration was their answer to critics in the Protestant movement throughout Europe and America, who said that the German church had failed to admit that they were complicit with Hitler. Granted, if anyone could be said to have been an exception to this, it was Niemöller. Nonetheless, it was Niemöller who insisted that the declaration admit that the church was complicit. Quote, "Through us, infinite wrong was brought over many peoples and countries. That which we often testified to in our communities, we express now in the name of the whole church. We did fight for long years in the name of Jesus Christ against the mentality that found its awful expression in the National Socialist regime of violence. But we accuse ourselves for not standing to our beliefs more courageously, for not praying more faithfully, for not believing more joyously, and for not loving more ardently." Close quote. Niemöller dedicated the rest of his life to rebuilding the Protestant church and promoting peace. Eventually, his famous confession was placed at Holocaust museums all over the world. Good morning, Nathan. Good morning, Jenny. Thanks for being here. Nikki, my dear flesh and blood sister and chosen family. I want to finish with a couple of things. Just sort of from the heart. And again, nothing that I'm about to say constitutes a political endorsement or criticism of any particular leader. This is about us as a people and what we have managed to forget. As I mentioned already, less than a third of American high school graduates 10 years ago could correctly answer basic questions about the Holocaust. Since then, things have gotten worse. Forgetting is not forgiving. For the oppressor, it is so much better because forgiveness requires an apology, and an apology requires admitting that the oppressor did wrong, and the oppressor never admits to doing wrong. I want to show you something, and I want to give a trigger warning. And maybe if you're very sensitive, you should take a quick walk away for about 60 seconds. I want to show you now a notice that was published, a memo that has now been confirmed by the Pentagon as authentic, that was issued within 24 hours of an order for the government to cease DEI activities this week. This is an order to indefinitely pause inside the Defense Department's intelligence agency, the administration, any events and special emphasis programs of the following. In January, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. In February, Black History Month. In March, Women's History Month. In May, Holocaust Day and Days of Remembrance. Also in May, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. In June, Pride. Also, Juneteenth. In August, Women's Equality Day. 15th of September, which if you don't know is Mexican Independence Day, through 15th of October, National Hispanic Heritage Month. In October, National Disability Employment Awareness Month. November, National American Indian Heritage Month. A special note given to the asterisks here, you'll see pause will not affect federal holidays. Forgetting is not forgiving. For the oppressor, it's so much better. Because when we forget, it repeats, and he wins. That's not about any one person. Hitler is gone. He escaped without ever bearing punishment for his crimes. That injustice remains forever. Justice is not something given to us by gods or governments. It's something we must do ourselves. It's a decision we take. But there are times when violence may become necessary for that. But in the midst of that violence, it's important that there are those who resist peacefully. Sometimes it may seem like that's impossible. How can anyone resist without fighting? Anne Frank did it. Max Sievers did it. Martin Niemöller did it. Of those, only Martin Niemöller survived. That is why the first and perhaps most sacred act of defiance that there is to stay alive. Martin Niemöller did it. If he hadn't, if millions of people in Germany and in Austria and in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, England, and America, people all over the world, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, hadn't survived, then all the people who died fighting would have been lost for nothing. So when oppression includes removing people from our world, the greatest act of defiance is to stay alive. And so if the only thing you can do when you are oppressed is to stay alive, remember it's what Martin Niemöller did. A man who originally supported the Nazis, but lived to spend the rest of his life admitting that he was guilty for having stood by and done nothing. That is why the second great act of defiance is to do what Anne Frank did and bear witness, even in secret. Get a journal, keep your thoughts there, preserve it. Record yourself talking about what's happening and keep it someplace safe. Anything you can do in a moment of oppression to preserve and bear witness to the oppression, so that if you don't survive, that can be maintained to bear witness when you are gone. The third great act of defiance is to do what Max Sievers and Germany's atheists did, and that is to speak out. Not everyone can do it because, frankly, as we saw with Max Sievers, it's dangerous. In a moment of oppression, the person most at risk, most in danger, is the person who fights not with bullets, but with words. The most defiant thing that you can do in a moment when the state, when leaders, when churches, when opinion leaders do nothing but lie, the greatest act of defiance is to tell the truth. It is incumbent on all of us, when we are safe and when we have the courage, to tell the truth, but not at the risk of not staying alive. How much better the world would have been had the United States allowed Max Sievers in. What would he have done? What would Max have done here? You know, Martin Niemöller died in his bed peacefully in the 1980s. That could have been Max. Max Sievers could have come to America. He could have participated in the civil rights movement. Think about that. He could have marched with Martin Luther King. He could have fought against oppression here in America. He could have stood alongside Cesar Chavez. He could have stood together with us here in America and brought that amazing power here. In a moment, I'm going to play you a new hymn of the Church of Korihor I'm particularly proud of, and it's going to be the start of a new series I'm going to call Heroes of the Resistance. And all I'm going to ask is that people take it and share it. In the future, I'm planning to set up a new campaign for those who want to donate $1 a month so that we can advertise it. And 100 pennies of every dollar will go to advertising this video. Me personally, I am going to contribute $10 a day going forward to promoting this this series of hymns honoring people who are heroes of the resistance, heroes of the Holocaust, so that we can get this message out to at least 100 people a day, so that we can start remembering hopeful messages, even about tragic events like what happened to Anne Frank, to remember and inspire others that simply to bear witness can be an act of defiance. Simply putting words down so that it will be remembered what happened can be an act of resistance. Again, nothing that I'm saying now is an endorsement of any political movement, party, or candidate, nor criticism of any regime or individual leader. One of my favorite novels was by a man named Sinclair Lewis, who traveled in Europe while the fascists were rising to power in Italy and in Germany and in Spain, which often gets forgotten about. And he said he went traveling around and then came back to America and was surprised to find that in America, people would say, well, what happened over there can never happen here. And he was startled at the opinions of Americans who thought themselves so much better than all of Europe. And he wrote a book called It Can Happen Here, and laid out very particularly how in the 1940s, before social media, obviously, before the internet, before even television, in the events that he created, fictional story, a great Christian radio evangelist would take to the airwaves, where he would endorse a new political leader to restore righteousness and purity to the great American spirit. And based upon this radio evangelist's words, a man got elected into power who they called the chief. They insisted that he be called the chief. And soon he awarded himself supreme power, made himself a dictator, and began gathering up groups that he saw as being evil or corrupt or labeling them as terrorists, and gathering them up into camps, which, by the way, is something that America did after Pearl Harbor. And a newspaper editor became the one to organize a resistance movement to violently resist the new regime. He eventually gets sent to camps himself and watches as members of his family perish. Eventually, in the story, the resistance wins and America re-emerges, finding its soul again. So, of course, it was a big hit. It was made into a play called It Can Happen Here. It's also a big hit because, of course, in the end, the real America wins. Sinclair Lewis said, when fascism comes to America, it will be draped in the flag and carrying the cross. That deserves to never be forgotten. Forgetting is not forgiving. Don't ever forget that first they came for the socialists. By then it was too late to stop them. And the greatest act of defiance was to stay alive. Then bear witness. Then speak out. But if all that you can do is to stay alive, do it. After the closing hymn, First Book and Last, we will end this stream and start a new one for Linger Longer so people can join. In that stream, there will be a link to the live stream so that those who want to come in to talk, we can talk about church business. We can talk about whatever's on your mind. And of course, any challenges to the church are to the First Heralds are welcome. We had a lot of success last Wednesday. There weren't a lot of people here for that because at the same time, LDS Discussions was apparently live, and so we didn't have a lot of our normal congregants were watching that instead, which is totally cool. But we had an interesting experience with somebody who had challenged us in the video with Richard Carrier. A Mormon by the name of Porter joined us. I had challenged him and said, "Why don't you come live and I'll tell you some things about Mormonism." And he learned some things. He liked it. he said, "I really like this little church you guys have going here." He came in to challenge me, but by the end, he ended up staying for Linger Longer on Wednesday. And he met my sister, and he met those people who showed up to Linger Longer, and he enjoyed himself. So I'm like, yeah, you know what? I may convert some Mormons out of this. But, not that, Porter, when you see this, I don't expect you to convert. It's fine. I just want to say a couple of things. One event that I didn't talk about was right about the same time that Martin Niemöller was trying to escape the concentration camps by volunteering to go fight for the Nazis. And there was an event that happened when a Jewish man in Paris assassinated a German diplomat. And Hitler used it as an excuse, just like the Reichstag fire, to start something called Kristallnacht. It's surprising to me how I can say Kristallnacht today, and people don't know what I'm talking about. You may have heard this term. Kristallnacht in German means the night of broken glass. It was the start of the Holocaust against the Jews. And all they needed was one person to take out one person. And they started raiding synagogues and Jewish-owned businesses and Jewish homes. They took tens of thousands of Jewish men as enemies of the state and deported them and sent them to camps to be deported. It was an immigration issue, even though many of those German Jews, Austrian Jews, Jews all over Europe were German citizens. They didn't care. That's how it started. That's what Kristallnacht was. They took Jewish men and sent them into these deportation camps. Those deportation camps, 6 of them in the end, are what concentration camps were. Don't forget. Forgetting is not forgiving for the oppressor. It's much better. Amen. Oops. Have to select the new file. See it linger longer.
Hidden away, a young girl writes treasured thoughts